Hi guys, this is Grace. So I'll be introducing the product life cycle of Nokia, and one of my colleagues will be clicking onto the next slides as I speak. So let's get on to it. First slide is the introduction stage where Nokia released the first phone, Nokia 1011. It's the first mobile device where people could easily connect with another person within a certain distance. Then released was 2100. It's a series actually, but that was the most popular, where they removed the antenna and shrank the size for the phone, so it increases flexibility, maneuvering abilities, and it was easy to carry around. Followed by the 1000 series, the 1100, where it was a success and received the biggest attention by then for Nokia, and it was also the first phone to send and receive SMS messages. So, since people didn't like to call all the time, it was also a breakthrough to be able to receive and send messages. So, the next slide is the year where they first released the N95. Now, that was a game changer. That phone changed everything. It was the first complete multimedia computer within a list of functionality packed inside a single small device. Now, that alone had 1 million handsets that were sold in the UK alone, and was also the peak of their life cycle. So it was the epiphany and the biggest thing that Nokia ever released. And so you can see it in the next slide actually that the sales was the highest for Nokia for that phone on October 2007. Moving on, we have the next slide. I'm just going to quickly go through. We have the first iPhone that was released in June 2007. That was where Nokia started to be a bit worried because the launch of the iPhone was also raising concerns because it was unique and it was simple for users and the design was so nice. But fortunately, to Nokia's advantage, the company didn't really manage to capture the whole market, but it caught a lot of the attention because of its device. Like it looked different. So, continuing on, actually, Nokia could have done something about that, but they quite didn't. They continued on with their devices that was releasing, and hence the maturity stage. The next slide, which was the biggest turnover, where Apple created the iPhone 3G and later the 3GS. The Nokia model that was released afterwards just looked like bricks, as they said in the reviews. The iPhones were so slick, they were simple, it was easy to use, and it caught so much of the attention of the market. And so, this was where Nokia was getting more worried about their devices, and they tried to make their devices touchscreen, their devices a bit more internally focused rather than the external, but still, it didn't match up with their level. And this was also the period where Samsung Galaxy series was released during 2000, around the 2009 to 11 stage. So it also created the maturity stage of the company. Next slide is the decline, where Nokia just couldn't compete with the growing market. They couldn't do it anymore because the models that were releasing, they were too slow. It was too thick, and the processors at the moment was 332 megahertz, 64 megabytes of RAM. At the moment, we deal with 16 gigabytes of RAM. So 64 megabytes is extremely slow, and it was non-user friendly. I've read a review where a lot of people were criticizing how it was very difficult to even take a phone call. So they needed a manual for the device, where an iPhone you can just use it, and in 3 seconds you know exactly what to do. So it was really a shame that Nokia had invested so much in the Symbian platform, introduced in the maturity stage. They thought it was still the best thing ever. They were just reluctant to let it go, compared to the simple touch interfaces. But yes, the next slide. I'm going to compare quickly of the iPhone and the N97 that was released in the maturity stage, called the iPhone killer. You can see itself that the two models were just different. Just looking at the designs itself, it looked like there was a huge generation gap. So just to point out a few things in the list, the iPhone had an iOS system. It was a different system created just for Apple models. And to add on to it, they had an iOS system app store. They had their own app store, meaning that it became more of a smartphone, a mini computer. You can download your own applications that you want, the things you need, that was available in the store back then, and people could play games, watch videos, and do anything they want on the phones, just like a small computer. Compared to the N97, which just wasn't good enough. They still had the Symbian OS. The device and the way it looked just looked generations slow and back, and they still had the internet. So they didn't quite have the App Store availability, so you can just download things from the internet there, and it just wasn't nice. And they had a attachable keyboard where you can slide out, and it's called a QWERTY keyboard. So it just didn't look nice to the design. It looked still old, whereas the iPhone devices had a keyboard separately on screen. So there's a lot of other differences in this slide, but we'll move on to the main point where how we can make it better. How could have Nokia done it better? So that they could have read the trends on time. They could have been less stubborn. They could have accepted the fact that the software development was better than external functionality. They could have carried out second market research on the growing trends and popularity of the internet, wireless services, GPS, simpler designs, so many other things. But most importantly, other than reading the trends, they could have fixed the internal politics. That was the biggest problem of Nokia. The communication between the higher and the middle managers was not good, and it was also the main cause of why it declined itself, because the people in Nokia destroyed Nokia. They could have carried out, to fix this, motivation tactics. They could have changed motivation tactics between the top and the middle managers, so the middle managers were more encouraged to tell what they wanted to say what they wanted to say, and not be ashamed about it, because the people there were scared. They were scared because they might lose their career from pointing out the flaws, because the top managers was pressuring the middle managers to produce better products, better ideas, when they knew that no matter what, it just didn't work, because they had to accept the fact that the technology was not good enough compared to the iOS and the Android that was coming out in the market. And so what they could have done for that was to appoint external engineers, professional engineers, that could have created their own new software, something that was different. But they had decided to collaborate with Microsoft. Not a bad idea. Collaborating with Microsoft, their software was much advanced than the Android and iOS itself. But it was too slow. It was too late. They could have done it a few years earlier, but they did not. But honestly, if all was not to do well, if all comes to lost, what Nokia could have done in the end was to find another niche market, because initially they had other products they were producing before their phones. So in the end, they could have done something like audio, more focusing on music, earphones, MP3 players, or MP4 players, compared to like something like the iPod Touch, but even better. Video making, cameras. They could have done so many other things that was already good in their phones, advance it and separate it. That's what I can say that could have given a bit of sales for Nokia, and I think that will be it for my section. Thank you. Bye.